Vincent van Gogh. Imagine a painter. He creates hundreds of paintings throughout his life. He sacrifices everything for art. Yet when he dies, almost no one knows his name. Today, his works sell for hundreds of millions of dollars. This is the story of Vincent van Gogh. Born in the Netherlands in 1853, Van Gogh grew up in a rather remarkable family. His grandfather was a minister. His father was a minister. Many members of his family were educated and respected individuals. But from an early age, Vincent was different from other children. He preferred nature to crowds. He would spend hours walking alone, observing trees, fields, and the sky. The most important person in his life was his brother, Theo. The bond between the two brothers was so strong that hundreds of their letters have survived to this day, helping us understand Van Gogh better than almost any other artist in history. As a young man, he began working at an art gallery. For him, this was more than just a job. It was a new world where he discovered books, paintings, and the broader world of art. Because of his success, he was later sent to London. There, Van Gogh experienced one of the happiest periods of his life. He was deeply inspired by the city, its culture, and the new experiences it offered. However, over time, his life took a significant turn. After this period, he became more withdrawn, and his connection to art grew even stronger. For a while, he devoted himself to religious work. He tried to help people. He lived among the poor. He closely observed the lives of miners and laborers. These experiences would later become the foundation of many of his paintings. In 1885, he created one of his first major works, The Potato Eaters. This painting did not portray the wealthy or the aristocracy. Instead, it focused on ordinary people, tired faces gathered around a table, hands roughened by hard labor, a dark and modest room. Through this painting, Van Gogh wanted to show the reality of everyday life. Today, art historians consider it one of the turning points in his career. A year later, he moved to Paris. And this is where everything changed. At the time, Paris was the center of the art world. There, Van Gogh met many influential artists of the era. He learned new techniques. He transformed his use of color. His paintings became brighter, more vibrant, and more expressive. The result was the emergence of the unique style that the world now instantly recognizes as Van Gogh's. One of the most important artists he met in Paris was Paul Gauguin. The two began working together. They spent countless hours discussing art and exchanging ideas. When Van Gogh later moved to the town of Arles in southern France, he was filled with excitement. He dreamed of turning the yellow house he rented there into a creative community where artists could live and work together. His time in Arles became the most productive period of his artistic career. It was there that he painted the famous Sunflowers series. Today, these works are among the most recognizable paintings in the world. Their brilliant yellows and bold brushstrokes became symbols of Van Gogh's artistic vision. Yet the Arles period was not defined by success alone. As time passed, his loneliness deepened. The challenges in his life grew more severe. Despite this, he never stopped painting. In fact, he worked with even greater intensity. Later, while staying in a care facility, he created one of the most famous paintings in history, The Starry Night. Today, it is almost impossible to find someone who has never seen this masterpiece. Swirling stars, a moving sky, glowing light. Through Van Gogh's distinctive brushwork, the heavens seem almost alive. The Starry Night is far more than a landscape painting. It is one of the most powerful and influential works in the history of art. Van Gogh's productivity was extraordinary. In a career that lasted only about 10 years, He produced more than 2,000 works of art. Hundreds of these were oil paintings. Remarkably, most of them were created during the final years of his life. Yet during his lifetime, he received very little recognition. His works rarely sold. Most people failed to understand his art. But Theo never stopped supporting him. He stood by his brother both financially and emotionally. Theo's contribution to Van Gogh's legacy cannot be overstated. In 1890, at the age of just 37, Vincent van Gogh's life came to an end. He left behind hundreds of paintings. But the most remarkable part of his story was yet to come. After his death, his work gradually began to attract attention. Art historians recognized how unique and revolutionary he truly was. His paintings influenced new artistic movements. He became one of the key figures in the development of modern art. Today, Van Gogh's works are displayed in some of the world's most prestigious museums. Millions of people stand in long lines just to see his paintings. The artworks that once attracted little interest are now considered among the most valuable treasures in the history of art. Perhaps Van Gogh's story reminds us of one simple truth. Some people are far ahead of their time. And sometimes, the true value of an artist can only be understood many years later. Let's talk about important works of Van Gogh. The Potato Eaters, Van Gogh's first act of rebellion. In 1885, Van Gogh completed one of the most important paintings of his career, The Potato Eaters. At first glance, it seems like an ordinary scene. A table, several people sitting around it, a coffee pot, and a few potatoes. But Van Gogh spent weeks living among peasant families in order to create this painting. He observed how they lived. He watched how they worked. He even studied their hands in particular, because to him their hands were a summary of their life stories. Hands that dug the soil, planted seeds, harvested crops. That is why the people in the painting do not appear beautiful. Van Gogh does not try to idealize them. On the contrary, he presents them exactly as they are. Because in his view, the purpose of art is not to hide reality, but to reveal it. Today, many art historians consider this painting Van Gogh's first major step toward modern art. Sunflowers, a symbol of friendship. When people think of Van Gogh, one of the first works that comes to mind is sunflowers. However, the story behind these paintings is far more emotional than most people realize. When Van Gogh moved to the town of Arles in southern France, he had a great dream, a house where artists could live and create together. At the center of that dream was Paul Gauguin. To celebrate Gauguin's arrival, Van Gogh wanted to fill the walls of his home with his own paintings. That is how the Sunflowers series came into being. To him, the color yellow meant hope. It meant energy. It meant life. The sunflowers were not merely paintings of flowers. They were symbols of a dream of friendship. Today, the sunflowers paintings in London, Amsterdam, and Tokyo are among the most recognizable works of art in the world. There was a very interesting reason why Van Gogh painted so many self-portraits. The truth is, he could not afford to hire models. So he stood in front of a mirror and spent hours painting himself. Thanks to the self-portraits that survive today, we can follow Van Gogh's transformation through the years, step by step, from a young artist to a mature painter. His exhaustion, his determination, and the increasingly profound expression on his face. Some art historians describe these portraits as the first visual diary in art history, because while Van Gogh was painting himself, he was actually documenting his life. The Starry Night, the most famous sky in the history of art, painted in 1889. The Starry Night is now one of the most famous works of art in the world. The first thing that catches the eye is the sense of movement. The sky seems to be swirling. The stars appear to shimmer. The clouds seem to flow. The entire universe looks alive. This is where Van Gogh's genius reveals itself. He did not simply paint what he saw. He painted what he felt. That is why The Starry Night is not merely a landscape painting. It is a painting of emotion. More than a century later, people still experience different feelings when they look at it. Some find peace. Some feel loneliness. Others discover hope. Perhaps that is why it has become one of the most influential works in the history of art. Wheatfield with Crows. One of Van Gogh's final period works, Wheatfield with Crows, remains one of the most discussed paintings in art history. The painting shows a vast yellow field. Black crows fly overhead. A path running through the middle disappears into the horizon. Many viewers sense a profound feeling of loneliness in the work. No one today knows its exact meaning. However, art historians believe the painting reflects Van Gogh's state of mind and inner world during the final stage of his life. Perhaps that is why it continues to move people, because sometimes great works of art do not provide answers. They simply ask questions. Throughout his life, Van Gogh created approximately 900 oil paintings. Today, the total value of these works is measured in billions of dollars. But his true legacy is not money. It is his ability to show the world how one person saw life. The light he saw when he looked at sunflowers. The sense of wonder he felt when gazing at the night sky. And the value he found in the lives of ordinary people. Perhaps that is why, more than 130 years later, the name Vincent van Gogh is still remembered.